It's been a year since the Russia-Ukraine war started, and many people have been witness to the war. There are some eyewitnesses who have covered it like no one else have. And I have one such reporter with me, a very experienced conflict reporter, Gaurav Sawant of India Today. Gaurav, we would like you to remember a few instances of the coverage of the war. Start with the beginning. How did you end up in Ukraine, and were you there before the war started?
So the first missile came in on the 24th of February, the night intervening 23rd and 24th. We got there on the 19th of February and we flew into Kyiv. So, that's where India Today takes the lead because everything was well planned. War clouds were there. People knew that tension was high. There was an apprehension there could be conflict, and everyone was hoping against hope that there wouldn't be conflict. When we got there, we went thinking that perhaps we'll be there for a week, 10 days max. And there would be tension, maybe some border tension, maybe some border skirmishes, but nobody, at least on the 19th of February, even in Kiev, thought that missiles would come raining in and tanks would roll in and they would be on the outskirts of Kiev, which happened within a week of our being there.
There was no anticipation for the war, but when there is a plan of such a big conflict or such a big aggression, usually there is some rumor mill which is working in the back. So were people in Ukraine aware of the fact that something's going to happen, or life was just going on as usual? What did you witness?
A bit of both. So in the heart of Kiev, we would see a lot of soldiers come to that very famous sign in a place called Krishyatika, which is like the Connaught Place of Kiev, the capital, which said "I love Ukraine." And these very handsome men and very pretty women. Almost everyone there I thought was very good looking, both the men and the women. They would come there and take those very lovey-dovey pictures next to that sign, hugging, kissing, meeting each other, and the men were all going to the front lines. So and that's the time we landed there. We went straight to that point because I'd read about it, and we started interviewing people. So our first story came right from that point. It was raining, it was very cold. That's where we got our first interview, and a series of interviews after that from that point. So the soldiers were all going to the front lines, but before going they were also partying, and wild partying that Ukraine is very famous for. Nightclubs were on, parties till about 4 in the morning, which is something again that we were covering, but war clouds were still there. Putin was meeting the president of Belarus, and troops were moving on both sides. So it was a combination of both, and it was surreal. In fact, on the night of the 23rd, we were covering a nightclub where an entire battalion was moving to the front lines, and the wives and girlfriends were seeing off their soldiers. So we were covering that 3 in the morning, and an hour or two later, zoom, missiles started coming in. So it was like that.
Probably, those images that you have captured, they could one day become as iconic as those World War pictures where you see girlfriends and wives kissing away soldiers, and same emotion.
We've got hundreds of those pictures with us. We've done so many of those stories, including those who'd got their wives or husbands' names tattooed. There were some who had shloks tattooed on them. I interviewed those people, young soldiers who'd been to India. They would read the Bhagavad Gita. I interviewed a soldier who recited a shlok from the Bhagavad Gita. And we have that, and that story went viral on both on Aaj Tak and on India Today at that point of time. So we saw this initially. With some of these soldiers, we also moved because they said Kharkiv in the east, that was becoming very tense. So we drove through the night. We got to Kharkiv. We went right up to the front lines on that border. But that time, some missiles were coming in, but Kharkiv wasn't very hot. Then after the 24th, a week after that, we went to Mariupol. And Mariupol was like really tense. That's the place where the Russians really hit big. Azovstal and all that, and that is where we saw the conflict for the first time. When we went to the front lines, this was a road, the Russians on the other side, the Ukrainians on this side, anti-tank guided missiles, tanks, armored personal carriers, troops deployed. You mentioned Second World War. You and I have read Commando comics when we were kids, right? Those Commando comics, it's almost as if I was seeing those Commando comics. The hedgehogs, those X-shaped steel, barriers, the tanks in Europe in 21st century. It was absolutely surreal watching it.
I can understand that. But do tell us that when you saw all that, this is a perfect, picturization of a war-torn place. Were you ever worried about your safety? I'm sure there were times when your life was in danger. Were you ever worried about your safety?
So there was this one time where, since I was very well networked with the Ukrainian forces and their civil defense, there was a there was and there was an apprehension that a missile would come and hit an industrial complex. So we knew that was likely to happen. So we were in that general area. Usually people run away from that area, but journalists
Pick up our cameras and run towards
run
it.
towards danger, and perhaps that's why they say fools rush in where angels fear to tread. And it's something that I've got on camera. We're filming a building that's on fire, and we can hear missiles go whoosh on top, and suddenly, there was this Indian gentleman there who was very kind to us, Mr. Kuldeep Kumar. He grabs my hand and says, "Run, incoming missile!" And there are hundreds of soldiers who are running away from that area, and we're also running away from that area. And suddenly you hear some distance away, of course, a loud thud, bang, and fire all over that place. Again, something that we've got on camera, and it's amazing that we've got all these things on camera.
See, you can see that stress on camera so many times. That tells you he's a true blue reporter. But do tell me, there must be some instances that you keep remembering again and again. Of course, this is just a year ahead of what happened. But are there some anecdotes that make you smile when you think about the war, though it's a war?
The people, very nice people of Ukraine. I became very fond of them because, quite like us, they're so full of life, and they know there's a difficult situation, and they're fighting on. Incidentally, I've also seen this on the Russian side, not during this conflict, but otherwise, since as defense reporters we cover Russia, and I've reported from ground zero in Russia also. But there was this one instance when we were in Mariupol. We were in a train, locked in a train for about 13 hours plus. Through the night we stayed in the train. The train didn't move, and we weren't allowed to leave because missiles were raining all around that area. And in the morning they said, sorry, there's a track that's been destroyed up ahead, so you cannot go by train from Mariupol. You can now leave. And we went to the market, and everyone was withdrawing money, desperately withdrawing money. Again, since you're a television journalist yourself, we were live on a broadcast. Shivarur was the anchor here, and I was talking to people, and there was this very lovely couple, looked a little tense but smiling at the same time, and this lady said, we're all trying to get out of here, but we can't, and you and I will all die here. And she still had a smile on her face, or words to that effect, that we're all stuck here together and we might as well smile through it. That story stays with me.
Poignant words, and I'm sure at that point of time it hits you also hard, because it's reality dictated through someone else's tongue. But once the war progressed, and you were there for almost 2.5 months, in and out, in two stints, which is a long period of time. Once the war progressed, how did you see it changing? Because initially there is an excitement. Even we have that, oh, war has started. After that, there is a fatigue. So how did you see that changing on the ground there, and in your reporting also? Did you feel that?
So, not in the 2 months that I was there. Again, in Mariupol, when the trains couldn't move, there were no flights. It was a no-fly zone. Russia had virtual air supremacy, and especially no civilian flights anyways. So we had to get out of Mariupol. They were bombing Mariupol, and they would actually, through their informers, announce that this is the street we'll be targeting today. So the day we knew that the street where our hotel was, that street was to be targeted, our hotel said, you have to leave. And we said, but we can't. There are no trains. We are not getting any taxis. And somebody says, okay, I'll take you, but I'll charge you $2,000 because it's his life at stake, and he'll go all the way up to Dnipro, which is 7 hours away, to drop you. Somebody I know told us that there's this lady who wants to leave, but her driver has run away. So if you can drive her car, you can drive her to safety, and you can drive to Dnipro. And I said, yeah, sure. So we got into her car, my camera person and I, and this other Indian officer with ex-officer with us who was also reporting with us. And we got out of there. I was driving. This lady was sitting next to me. The cameraman was behind, and again, we were live. Very good internet connectivity even there. And this officer was just showing what's happening around, and he said, so that's a checkpoint. We didn't know whether there was a Russian checkpoint there. We didn't know whether there was a Ukrainian checkpoint. And suddenly, in the rearview mirror, I saw this man lift his rifle and tuck, 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 he started firing in our direction. And this officer said, oh my God, they're firing at us. We were live again on India Today at that point of time, and he said, they're firing at us. And I could see the gun in the rearview mirror, and we just saw, okay, that's the gun. Swerved hard right, then swerved hard left, and then swerved hard right again, because the firing just continued. But we managed to dodge it, fortunately. So God was on our side, and we were driving like non-stop, practically almost 150 kilometers per hour, and we got out of there, and fortunately got out of there alive. And this lady, I mean, she was a senior citizen. She was very friendly, and she was singing Raj Kapoor songs on the way. Again, something that we have on camera.
But this is not the only time you went knocking on death's door. I think you were, especially in cars, you were in a habit of driving to all sorts of places which were sort of mined with danger.
So, we didn't know the language, and there's no signboard in English. And there was no signboard anyways there, because the Russians were already inside Ukraine, at least a part of Ukraine. So another time, Zaporozhye is again very crucial. Nobody wanted to go there, and nobody was willing to take us there. So we drove to Zaporozhye from Kiev, which again was good 5-6 hours one way. When we got to Zaporozhye, we reported from there. There was shelling on. That's the time that the Russians were advancing in a big way. They were almost on the outskirts of Zaporozhye, and tank battles were taking place. And we were reporting on those tank battles. And then we decided we'll fall back on Kiev. And we made the mistake of leaving in the afternoon, late afternoon, from a city trying to get to Kiev by night. There are two stories I will tell you here. So we drove, and petrol was being rationed. So we drove about 100-150 kilometers. There wasn't another vehicle on the road, just ours. And I said, wow, great highway. And we're doing very well. We're going really fast. But when you're driving for an hour and there isn't a single vehicle on that road, you suddenly start to wonder. So I asked my camera person, I said, koi hai nahi? He said, haan, weekend hai, so gaye honge. I said, nahi, kuch to aur hoga. But there's no one on the road. Suddenly in one place, we see this man desperately waving his arms. Desperately.
Now, civilian or Indian?
Civilian. And we didn't know whether he's a soldier, we didn't know whether he's a civilian. And anyway, with civilians also with weapons, it was a very dangerous situation. And you carry a lot of dollars with you in cash on your person. So, ruke ki nahi ruke, but we decided we will stop. So we stopped. And he was frantically saying something which we couldn't understand. So we opened Google and Google Translation, and suddenly he said, are you guys mad? You're driving on a road which is full of anti-tank mines, because this is the road that the Russians are supposed to take to Kiev. So this road is full of mines. And 100 kilometers we had been on that road. Fortunately, we didn't get hit. So we said, how do we get back? Because even on the other side, it could be mined. So he said, so he was standing on the outskirts of a village. He took us inside the village, and from the other side, not the highways, from B roads and C roads, village roads, it took us double the time. We were safe, but out of fuel. And there was no petrol pump.
Is this the second story?
This is the second story that I'm coming to. So we said, what do you do? We have money, but there is no petrol, and petrol is being rationed. You don't get more than 20 liters, and we'd already taken 20 liters. And, we were driving a gas guzzler, a big Jeep, which is a gas guzzler. So what do you do then? So we saw this vehicle, and we decided to approach that vehicle. So we approached that vehicle from behind, and suddenly a vehicle came from front, and this vehicle was sandwiched, and we see 4 soldiers step out with their weapons cocked. And we were like, oh God, please don't shoot us, please don't shoot us, please don't shoot us. And I said, hi, we are journalists from India, with our hands up. By the way, we've got 3 videos of our hands up in Ukraine.
Universal language of saying, please don't shoot.
And we come with clean hands.
Yes.
We come with clean hands, and we are not combatants. And my camera person had his camera, which he showed that it's a camera, not a gun. So the moment we spoke English, that guy said, yeah, okay, relax, these guys aren't... They were Ukrainian Special Forces officers returning from an operation, and they too were looking for fuel. Yeah.
And they also had zeroed down on that vehicle.
So they had stopped near a petrol pump, as had we, with that petrol pump was in complete darkness, and the vehicle that came from the front was a Ukrainian border guards or their civil defense vehicle. But again, nobody knows who's anybody, and the Russians were also wearing Ukrainian uniform at times. So nobody knew what was happening, that fog of war situation. And we didn't know, are these guys going to shoot us? Are those guys going to shoot us? They didn't know whether we are going to shoot them. And for 20 minutes, so they frisked us. They checked our car. And they said, yes, you have no fuel. They wanted diesel, and they had 2 cans of petrol. And we wanted petrol. So Ukrainian soldiers gave us petrol for our car. And they said the bridge ahead has been destroyed in a missile attack. So you would have gone another 100 kilometers, used all this fuel, and you would have been stuck because that bridge was gone. So they took us from B roads. Again, we didn't know whether we can trust them. They'd given us fuel and they offered to share their food, but they were taking us through some bylanes. And we didn't know. And in Cairo, and both in Cairo and in Libya, I had seen journalists who went out with unknown people meet very sorry fate. So, anyway, so God was on our side, and they were real soldiers, and they were real friends who are friends with me even today. Like, I'm in touch with them even today. They're doing a great job in this situation. So they dropped us to our place in Kiev because they said you wouldn't be able to find it.
That's quite nice of them, and I'm glad your friends are still safe today. I mean, after 1 year of war and being soldiers. But lastly, as we end this, I want to ask you, what are your emotions regarding this war? What do you feel when you think about this war? But what do you think as a journalist is going to be the future of this war?
So, as a journalist and as someone who's seen a lot of bodies, both in Ukraine and very recently in Turkey, I don't want another bullet to be fired. I'm very clear about that. I don't want another missile to be fired. Whatever way, whatever the world can do, whoever can do whatever, just needs to prevail so that not another bullet is fired. It's very traumatic. I mean, I've been to Irpin, I've been to Bucha. Again, we were amongst the first to get to, first foreign journalists to get to Bucha. So we saw the massacre and we saw the bodies, with their hands tied behind their backs. We've got all of that on camera. The most harrowing story of Bucha that I've reported was this grandmother, and it's a story I reported. She would put milk and chocolates at a grave right next to her house because she lost her granddaughter, and the Russian tanks and the Ukrainian tanks were firing at each other in front of her house. Everything was destroyed. They didn't have electricity, they didn't have water, they didn't have food. This child was injured in a building collapse when a missile came and fell on a building. The child bled to death, couldn't be taken to a hospital, was buried right there. Every morning she would put milk and chocolates or whatever remained of milk and chocolates in her house on that grave. So I reported that story. And when she saw us, we had press written, we were wearing bulletproof jackets and helmets. When we got there, she just came and hugged us and said, oh, now that you are here, we know that there are no outsiders in this country, and now we are safe. And I just sat with her. We did a story on her plight, on that grave. She just broke down, and for whatever, I think we were there for 3-4 hours. 3-4 hours, she just cried non-stop. She kept speaking in Ukrainian, pointing out to that grave. And it was our translator, another journalist, a Ukrainian journalist, who kept saying, she's just saying, that child is feeling so cold because there's no heating. So that child is buried inside that grave feeling so cold. That's why I'm putting milk and chocolate so that the child is not hungry.
The human face of a war is always very, very poignant. It's sad, and it's a tragedy. And we do hope that this war, which can never have a romantic side to it, we always have to understand there is only one face to the war, which is ugly. So we hope that it ends, and we really do hope we don't do this next year. We don't have to do this conversation.
Though God forbid, we would probably be going to Ukraine again, because the Russians, we are told, are amassing between 2.5 lakh to 3 lakh troops. The Americans are arming the Ukrainians, and everyone's preparing for that big offensive. I just hope better sense prevails in the world, and this conflict stops. But we just may be on ground zero once again reporting it.
Well, that's all we have for you. But do tell us what you think about this video in the comment section. And for more news updates, subscribe to India Today.